There is a name you do not know. He holds no political office. He appears on no magazine cover. He has never given a TED Talk, never posted a net worth, never stood at a podium accepting an award while the cameras captured his gratitude. And yet, the decisions he made last Tuesday morning, alone, in a room with no windows, will shape the economic conditions of 3 countries before the end of the decade. You will never connect the outcome to the source. That is precisely the point. We live in an age that has confused visibility with power, an age that has mistaken the performance of wealth for wealth itself, an age where men willingly climb into the brightest possible light and call it success, never understanding that the light is not a reward, it is a target. What follows is not a motivational speech. There is no inspiration here. What follows is a cold examination of how power actually moves through the world. Not the power you are shown, but the power that shows you nothing, reveals nothing, and needs nothing from you except your continued distraction. Listen carefully. This is the last time anyone will say this clearly. The men who actually control wealth are never the ones you see on magazine covers, never the ones paraded on glowing screens, never the ones begging for admiration from crowds that secretly envy them. And every empire that rises loudly is eventually torn down just as loudly by the same eyes that once applauded it. Power, when it is genuine, has always understood one law that the poor refuse to learn. Visibility is a liability. Attention is a tax. And those who stand in the light become targets long before they become legends. Because men do not destroy what they cannot see. They cannot steal what they cannot locate. And they cannot plot against what remains a rumor instead of a face. In the summer of 1997, one of the wealthiest private fortunes in the Western Hemisphere quietly restructured across 47 different jurisdictions in a single weekend. No press release, no analyst call, no leak to the financial press. By Monday morning, $3 billion had moved in plain sight of every regulatory body on Earth, and not one of them had the jurisdictional clarity to do anything about it. The man who orchestrated this has a name. You do not know it. And that anonymity, that deliberate, engineered obscurity, was not a side effect of his strategy. It was the strategy. The masses are trained to believe that success must announce itself, that greatness must be witnessed, that wealth must sparkle in public in order to be real. Yet this belief is a trap designed by those who already rule. Because the more visible you are, the more predictable you become. And the more predictable you are, the easier it is to neutralize you, to bleed you through taxation, regulation, envy, litigation, and social pressure, until what once looked like a fortress becomes a cage of expectations and obligations. And you will find yourself working not for your own expansion, but for the comfort of those who watch you. The celebrated titans of industry who dominate your newsfeed, men and women of extraordinary talent who built genuine empires, stepped voluntarily into the public arena at the precise moment their power crested. Watch what happens next. It is always the same. The journalists arrive first, then the regulators drawn by the same headlines that drew the journalists. Then the politicians who understand that visible wealth is taxable wealth, not merely financially but politically. Then the class action attorneys, the activist investors, the former employees with grievances suddenly worth filing, and finally, inevitably, the public itself, which had once celebrated this figure with genuine enthusiasm, and begins the slow and pitiless project of moral audit. Because the crowd does not love power. The crowd tolerates power only when it cannot see it clearly. The moment power becomes visible, measurable, comparable, undeniable, it triggers something ancient and ungovernable in the human psyche, something that predates law, predates religion, predates civilization itself. The instinct that says too much, held by one, must be corrected. Fame is not the reward for success. Fame is the invoice. And the invoice comes with line items that most celebrated figures never fully read before signing. There is the taxation line, the regulatory line, the litigation line, and then there is the most expensive line of all, the expectation line, because once you are seen, you are known, and once you are known, you are claimed. The public claims you as a symbol of their own possibility, which means the moment you behave in a way that punches that symbol, the betrayal they feel is personal, irrational, and ferocious. You did not change. Their projection of you simply collided with reality. But you will pay for that collision regardless. The Roman Emperor Vespasian understood this when he said that the purpose of spectacle was to give the people something to look at, so they would not look too carefully at anything else. He was not describing entertainment, he was describing camouflage. The greatest empires in history, the ones that persisted across centuries rather than decades, were never the ones with the most celebrated rulers. They were the ones with the most invisible infrastructure. The banking families of Renaissance Florence did not advertise their political influence. The trading networks of the Dutch East India Company operated through layers of proxy ownership so complex that even its own shareholders could not fully map them. They understood what the celebrated never learn in time. The throne attracts arrows. The treasury, hidden in shadow, remains untouched. Understand the architecture of invisible wealth, and you begin to understand why the world looks the way it does. Real wealth, the kind that persists across generations, across market cycles, across political upheavals, is never held in a single name. It is held in structures, in layers, in networks of ownership so deliberately complex that no single regulator, no single journalist, no single adversary can map the full territory. This is not paranoia, this is engineering. When you own a company that owns a holding company that holds shares in a trust administered by a legal entity in a separate jurisdiction, you have not hidden your wealth. You have architected its protection. And that distinction is everything, because protection does not require secrecy, it requires complexity. And complexity, in the language of power, is another word for distance. Distance between your name and your assets. Distance between your face and your decisions. Distance between your identity and the structures that accumulate on your behalf. In the 1980s, a network of private capital operating through 7 layers of corporate ownership quietly acquired controlling interests in 14 mid-sized European media companies over the course of 3 years. No single acquisition was large enough to trigger regulatory review. No single entity held enough to require disclosure. But at the end of those 3 years, one man, whose name appeared on none of the filings, held effective editorial influence over news organizations reaching 40 million people. He did not hold a press conference to celebrate. He did not exist as far as the public record was concerned. He simply held the leverage, patiently, invisibly. This is the mechanics of shadow wealth, not secrecy in the crude sense, but the disciplined, architectural removal of yourself from the direct line of sight, because what cannot be clearly seen cannot be clearly targeted, and what cannot be clearly targeted cannot be efficiently extracted. When regulators know your name, they study your books. When journalists know your wealth, they study your morality. When the public knows your face, they study your fairness. And none of these examinations are neutral. They are weapons designed to create leverage over you, to force you into compliance, to slow you down until those who operate quietly can overtake you without resistance. The invisible man is a ghost in these systems, too small to bother, too obscure to target, too ambiguous to regulate with precision, and this ambiguity is his shield. Every dollar saved on the performance of wealth becomes a dollar deployed in its accumulation, compounded over decades. The invisible man does not merely outperform the celebrated one. He inherits the world the celebrated one was too distracted to protect. To understand why visibility destroys, you must first understand the precise mechanism by which it does so. The mechanism is not malice. It is something far more primal, far more reliable, and far more dangerous than malice. It is comparison. The human mind cannot perceive the success of another without immediately measuring it against its own condition. This measurement is involuntary. It happens before conscious thought engages, in the part of the brain that calculates survival, that tracks status within the group, that has not fundamentally updated its threat assessment since our ancestors were competing for position around small fires in the dark. When that comparison produces a deficit, when the measurement reveals that another holds significantly more than you, the emotional response is not admiration, It is resentment. And resentment, unlike its more passive cousin jealousy, does not merely wish for what another has. Resentment wishes for the removal of what another has. It does not want to rise to your level. It wants to bring you down to its level. And it will use every available tool to accomplish this: social pressure, moral argument, legal mechanism, political advocacy, or simply the quiet, persistent spreading of narratives designed to erode the foundation on which you stand. The celebrated man has made himself the perfect target for this mechanism because he has made himself visible to it. He has given the comparison instinct a precise measurement to work with. He has handed resentment a face to focus on. Consider carefully what this means. Societies do not revolt against inequality. They revolt against visible inequality. Every major tax reform in modern history has been preceded not by a change in actual wealth distribution, but by a change in the visibility of that distribution. Men do not hate power. They hate the sight of someone else holding it. And this is why every celebrated figure eventually becomes a villain in the public imagination, because the crowd forgives poverty but never forgives dominance. And once you are seen as having more than your share, the knives begin to sharpen in the minds of bureaucrats, journalists, and even your own neighbors who smile while secretly resenting your position. Resentment is always the seed of destruction. History offers its clearest lesson in the contrast between the Romanovs and the Rothschilds. The Romanovs displayed their power with a magnificence that was, by every aesthetic measure, extraordinary. Their palaces, their ceremonies, their public projection of absolute dominance was the most visible performance of wealth and authority in modern European history. And in 1918, that performance reached its conclusion in a basement in Yekaterinburg. The Rothschild family, across the same century, operated with a discipline of discretion that transformed their name from a single family into a symbol of invisible influence, not because the power they held was greater, but because it was distributed, layered, and structurally removed from any single point of attack. One family gave the resentment of the age a precise target, the other denied it one. The lesson is not subtle. The art of invisibility is not the art of disappearance. That distinction is critical. The invisible man is not hiding, he is present. Fully, strategically, consequentially present in boardrooms, in markets, in networks of influence that extend across industries and jurisdictions and relationships cultivated over decades. But he is present without announcing himself. He moves without leaving a trail that the systems of attention can easily follow. He participates in outcomes without attaching his identity to the process that produced them. He exists, in the public perception, as slightly less than he is. And that slight underestimation, that carefully maintained gap between what others believe and what is actually true, is where his real leverage lies. Because information asymmetry is the foundation of all strategic advantage. In every negotiation, in every acquisition, in every moment where two parties are attempting to extract value from an arrangement, the party that knows more wins. The invisible man has permanently structured his position to ensure that he knows more about those he deals with than they know about him, not through espionage, through presentation, through the simple disciplined practice of revealing only what serves his purpose, while allowing others, in their comfort around what they perceive as a lesser presence, to reveal everything. People speak freely around furniture. The invisible man is furniture until he isn't. A wise ruler, therefore, learns to wear masks, to let others take the stage while he holds the strings, to let loud men fight for attention while he moves quietly behind the curtain, where real decisions are made. Because applause is not power, and recognition is not security. Every man who trades privacy for praise will eventually discover that he has sold his freedom for a fleeting feeling of importance. This art requires, above everything else, the extinguishing of one particular desire, the desire to be known for what you have built. This desire is deeply human. The work of building something significant carries with it a nearly irresistible impulse toward acknowledgement, toward the moment when those who doubted, who dismissed, who failed to see the architecture you were quietly assembling, finally see it. That impulse is the single most expensive luxury available to the ambitious, because the moment of revelation is the moment of maximum vulnerability. The structure you have built in silence once revealed, immediately becomes subject to all the forces that its obscurity had held at bay. The announcement of your arrival does not consolidate your position, it initiates its erosion. The fox does not reveal himself at the edge of the forest and demand acknowledgement from the hunters. He is already 3 fields away when they realize he was ever there. The first discipline of the invisible is this: let others take credit for what you have made possible. This is not generosity, this is architecture. The person whose name is on the press release is also the person whose name is on the lawsuit. Let them stand in the light. It costs nothing to let another man be celebrated for standing on ground you own. The second discipline: accumulate options, not assets. Assets are visible. Assets can be seized, litigated, taxed, and redistributed. Options: the ability to move, to act, to acquire, or withdraw depending on conditions, are invisible by nature. The truly powerful man is not the one with the most assets. He is the one with the greatest freedom of movement. And freedom of movement is maximized by obscurity and destroyed by fame. The third discipline is the one that costs most: become comfortable with being underestimated. Not comfortable in the passive sense, comfortable in the strategic sense. The way a chess player is comfortable sacrificing a piece that appears valuable in order to achieve a position that will win the game 3 moves later. The underestimation of others is not an insult to be corrected, it is a resource to be deployed. Every assumption made about your limitation is a wall between you and your competitor's attention. Every dismissal is a door left unwatched. Every time someone decides you are not worth monitoring closely, you gain another degree of operational freedom that no amount of money can purchase directly. Those who do not understand this chase validation, they chase applause, they chase the illusion that being known is the same as being secure. And in doing so, they place themselves at the mercy of moods, markets, and mobs, while the invisible quietly convert every unnoticed advantage into a permanent increase in their leverage over the world that ignores them. This is not philosophy. Philosophy is what men discuss when they have already lost. This is operational reality, observed across centuries of empire building, across generations of dynastic wealth, across every serious study of how power actually functions when it is not performing for an audience. The men who run this world do not need you to believe in them. They do not need your admiration, your attention, or your awareness of their existence. They need only your continued participation in a system that rewards visibility with surveillance and punishes ambition with redistribution, while those who have chosen the path of shadow accumulate the options, the leverage and the freedom that the visible will never access, not because they are more talented, not because they worked harder, but because they understood one thing, one cold, unglamorous, deeply unfashionable truth earlier than everyone else: that the light is not a reward, the light is a cage, and the door was always open. You simply had to want the darkness more than the applause.